Founded in 1957, the IEEE Education Society is one of the IEEE's oldest societies. Focused on all things engineering education related, the IEEE Education Society encompasses all of the fields of interest within the IEEE, the world's largest professional association dedicated to advancing technological innovation and excellence for the benefit of humanity. Our community of engineers and educators is made up of more than 3,000 professional and student members, with more than 65 chapters spanning the globe. Members of the IEEE Education Society help each other grow both personally and professionally by networking and sharing common ideas and interests that further their knowledge and research. Getting involved in society committees, initiatives, and events helps our members collaborate on ideas, become leaders, and expand their networks. Education Society members receive free or discounted access to our Society's 4 publications, as well as opportunities to get published in one of our journals. If technical activities are your interest, joining one of our Society's 2 technical committees is a great way to get involved in research and standard development opportunities. Education Society members also enjoy discounted attendee and author registration rates at each of our 5 major conferences. Frontiers in Education Conference is the Society's flagship conference. Frontiers in Education focuses on advancing and redefining engineering and computing education to ensure that all students receive the best possible preparation for their future. Hosted annually in Region 10, the IEEE TAIL Conference caters to researchers and practitioners with an interest in engineering, technology, and integrated STEM education, as well as those interested in the innovative use of digital technologies for learning, teaching, and assessment in any discipline. The IEEE Global Engineering Education Conference, which is held annually in Region 8, provides a forum for academic, research, and industrial collaboration on global engineering education. The IEEE World Engineering Education Conference facilitates the exchange of knowledge and experience while serving as a meeting point for academics, professionals, researchers, and students interested in engineering and computing education. The IEEE Learning with MOOCs Conference is a respected international forum to collaborate, share, network, learn, and display the latest advances in MOOCs. IEEE Education Society membership provides exclusive opportunities for educators and students to gain knowledge and experience within their chosen fields, to be awarded and recognized for their work, expand their professional network, and so much more. Together, we're a dedicated group of skilled professionals and professionals in training, working toward the goal of helping our students build bright futures for themselves. Join us today. What will you learn?
Thank you so much for joining our webinar today, Tomorrow's Classroom Ecosystem, presented by the IEEE Education Society Technical Committee on Immersive Learning Environments. Before we get started, I just wanted to run through a few quick housekeeping slides with you and also provide a brief introduction to our webinar host today, Heather Dodds. This webinar is being recorded and the recording will be available on the Education Society website after the event. If you need assistance during the webinar, please use the Zoom chat feature to contact the webinar host. This will be either Taylor Bortz or Madison Musselman. And please use the question and answer feature found in your Zoom toolbar to submit any questions you have for the webinar speakers. Questions will be answered at the end of the webinar. Secondly, I wanted to let you know that we have enabled some accessibility services for this webinar. We do have live transcription available. So to use the live transcription feature, please enable it in your Zoom toolbar by clicking the CC button. As you can see in this picture, your Zoom toolbar is most likely located in the bottom portion of your screen. If you have any issue accessing the live transcription services, please send us a chat so we can help you get that enabled. Now I'd like to introduce our webinar host, Dr. Heather Elizabeth Dodds. Heather Dodds is a compassionate and enthusiastic research design advocate. Heather is a founding chapter counselor for Kappa Delta Pi, the International Education Honor Society. She has current UX certifications and holds a master's degree in e-education from the University of Phoenix, in addition to a doctorate in instructional design for online learning from Capella University. Heather's 2013 dissertation is on the quantitative effects of the virtual world on scientific inquiry skills. In the past 2 years, Heather has authored 2 book chapters, one on the use of XR in STEM education and one for her instructional designers guiding the use of XR in higher education. Recently, she also taught one of the first college courses ever to incorporate the Oculus Quest 2 headset. She actively publishes about the design and use of XR for learning via LinkedIn and her blog. Thank you so much, Heather, for joining us today, and I want to invite you to just go ahead and get started.
Thank you very much. Welcome, everyone. I'm so glad to welcome you this morning to this event. As per usual, an event like this isn't put on without a large team behind the scenes that brought us right up to this moment. So right off the bat, I want to acknowledge the fact that and give some thank yous out to some people that have brought us right to this moment. First of all, to the IEEE Education Society, which is our host for this event and has allowed us all to be with you today. So specifically, Madison Musselman and Taylor Bortz have been with me for several months as we've been organizing and pulling this event together. They've been answering my questions. They've been proactive and coming and giving me assistance wherever I've needed. So I really want to thank them. And then on behalf of the IEEE Education Society Technical Committee on Immersive Learning Environments, Christian Goodall, I'd like to thank as well, because it's really his leadership that has provided the avenue for this first public event to take place. So I want to give my thanks to that crew that you don't see on the screen much today, that is behind the scenes, that brought us right up to this moment. So this is the inaugural public event announcing that technical committee out of the Education Society. We're really proud to announce the Immersive Learning Environments Technical Committee. I'm going to actually drop the website, I hope. Yep, right there in the public chat. Let me make sure I hit it to everyone. There we go. And you can check us out. There's our website where you're encouraged to check us out, become a member. If you are already a member of IEEE, which chances are you are, if you've arrived at this webinar this morning, it's easy to join. If you're already a member of the Education Society, it's easy to join the technical committee. There are instructions on the website on how to do that. If you're not a member, I would encourage you to join us. And actually, I've been getting some questions from people who've been asking us, is it worth it to join? And I've been reminding them that you don't join an organization like this with a question of whether it's worth it. You join an organization like this asking, what skills and assets can I give into the organization? Since we're just getting started, I guarantee you probably have something we need. So please consider joining us, because we're all interested in this goal of learning more about immersive learning. Okay, let's get started onto this event. So I got a little introduction there at the beginning. I am Heather Dodds, and we're going to do an abbreviated introduction of each of the panel members today. We've got more panel members probably on the way, so we'll morph and bring them in as the panel keeps going on. We have some questions that we'll go through, but we're going to do a bit of a different introduction. We're sort of upskilling our introductions a little bit. We're going to do a brief introduction, and then I'll do a little bit of housekeeping of how the panel is going to go. So I'm Heather Dodds. I'm an unaffiliated researcher specializing in instructional design and accessibility in XR. For a visual description of myself today, I have light hair, black glasses. I'm wearing a purple shirt, and I speak with a Northern New York American accent. All right, so what I'd like to do is go around my panel members, and if you guys could please turn on your cameras, and I will pick you out, and you may do a quick introduction of yourself. So I'd actually like to start with Tassos.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm glad to be here with all of you. So I'm a physicist. I'm a professor at the University of Ioannina in Greece, Europe. My discipline is computer science and immersive technologies in education, and my research emphasizes on the pedagogical added value of immersive technologies in general, as well as in special education. In my research group, Earth Lab, we design, develop, and evaluate immersive learning environments and digital learning objects. I'm 60 years old, bald with a beard. Thank you.
Thank you, Tassos. Anasol, will you go next?
Absolutely. Hello, everyone. My name is Ana Sol Peña. I'm a research manager at British Telecom in the UK, where I do research on digital twins and immersive technologies for real-time decision-making support, collaboration, and training in industry. I have been working on immersive learning environments in academia and industry for the past 10 years, and I have dark brown hair and I speak with a Mexican accent.
Thank you. Dennis, will you go next?
Absolutely. Thank you, Heather. So my name is Dennis Beck. I'm an associate professor of educational technology at the University of Arkansas. I've been using immersive environments since the 1990s. So it dates me a little bit here. But my research advocates for digital educational equity for special education and culturally and linguistically diverse students in immersive learning environments. And a little bit about myself personally, I love backpacking and hiking. And I guess I speak with a Pittsburgh accent from Pennsylvania because that's where I grew up. So Yins guys, welcome.
There you go. Wonderful. And Lionel, who's on mute. And we're imagining what you sound like.
Oh gosh, thank you. Probably I would sound better on mute. So guys, I'm Lionel Morgado. I'm Associate Professor of Rehabilitation at the Universidade Aberta, which is the Portuguese Open University. I'm also a senior researcher at in ESCTech, that's this research center right here. I'm the secretary of the Portuguese Association of Video Game Sciences, and I'm vice president of for scientific quality of the Immersive Learning Research Network. Those are the 4 logos on my back. I've been working with this kind of immersive environment since probably since 2000, when I started my PhD, trying to work with the preschoolers, 3 to 5-year-olds, and computer programming with animated worlds and loading birds on trucks and stuff like that. So it was really, really fun. Ever since, so it's 32 years since I've worked with all school agent levels, from preschool to higher education, with the military, with companies. And always the concern was, how can people learn more complex stuff, more interesting stuff at a deeper level, not just science, but also the humanities, also social meaning. How can the understanding be more profound? How can people be freer to work, to understand stuff better and make decisions better? And eventually this led me here. My accent is Portuguese, for those interested in knowing, and I also played the Portuguese guitar and just started to learn the trombone.
Excellent, thank you. And do we have Daphne out there? Madison and Taylor, you might need to elevate her.
I'll do that right now.
Okay, yep, okay, she's out there. One more. We do have Fridolin. You see him on the screen right now. Fridolin is our surprise. So you'll just have to wait for Fridolin. So he's surprise package, we promise, at the end. All right, Daphne, there she is. Oh, we had microphone on, now we got it on. There we go.
Hello, I'm Daphne Economou. I'm a senior lecturer at the School of Computer Science and Engineering at the University of Westminster, London, UK. And I have just above 25 years of experience in higher education. I'm a senior fellow of Higher Education Academy. I received my PhD in human embodiment in VR learning environments 20 years ago. And since then, I'm active researcher in this area. I'm interested in gamification in VR as a motivational element to engage users and as a pedagogical element to facilitate learning. I lead the Serious Games Research Group at the University of Westminster, and I have light brown hair, I wear glasses, and I speak Greek with Greek accent that after approximately 25 years living and working in the UK, I cannot soften.
Excellent, well done. That's our panel. Thank you, everyone, for a great introduction around there. I appreciate that. If you want to know more bios of everyone on the panel, we have placed them on the TCILE website. I'll, through this webinar, keep trying to put up links in the chat, as I can do more than one thing at once. I'll try that. So I do encourage you to contact our panelists if you have more questions about things that you want to talk about. As you've noticed, we drew together an amazing wide spectrum panel here today. So that was on purpose, to bring a wide range of people together. So a little bit of housekeeping of how we're going to run this panel. Actually, when we sat together, all of us drew together the questions together. So all of us contributed a bunch of questions, and then I looked at them, and what I did is I knitted together a story that we could actually bring you through, and then we'll have Fridolin at the end as a surprise. So a promised surprise at the end of our presentation for the attendees, and even those on the recording will get access to the surprise. So that's for everybody. But when we first started pulling together the questions, one of the questions that we were, one of the key words that we were all attracted to. Oh, did I miss Melanie? Thank you for screaming at me in the chat. Thank you very much. And Melanie's just sitting there looking at me nicely. She's just like, hey, me too. Oh my goodness. I tell you what, I'll pause on my long run into introduction and say, I forgot to introduce Melanie and have her do her introduction. Melanie, would you like to say your intro?
No problem. Thank you very much. So I'm Melanie Platz. I'm a professor for didactics of primary education with a focus on mathematics at Saarland University, where I train primary school teachers. And since about 10 years, I've been researching about technology in education, especially in mathematics education, with a focus on not only learning with digital media or with technology, but also about technology, which is getting more and more important. As you can see, I have blonde hair, I'm wearing glasses, and I speak with a German accent, which I also cannot get rid of. Okay, thank you very much.
Oh, we couldn't have done this without Melanie. Really, we can't do this without you. So thank you so much. Very good. All right. So all of our questions focus on the ecosystem, because we feel like at this point in time in immersive learning, it's no longer about whether a school is bringing in 30 headsets to explore immersive learning. They're probably already making that decision. It's now, how do you train the teachers? How do you expand that out to more teachers to use? It's being brought into the workplace. What do you do with the data that these headsets are collecting? It's about more pieces feeding into the system. So all of us on the panel were very attracted by that word ecosystem. We all saw this as a multifaceted system. None of us said, hey, let's do an entire talk about headsets, or let's do an entire talk about accessibility. There wasn't any interest in that. We all said, let's talk about the interfunctioning system as it goes together. All right. So I'm going to ask my questions in sets of 2, maybe sets of 3 occasionally. I've got them all lined up. They already know what their questions are. They've had a chance to prepare, so this isn't sneak attack. We're going to start with on the big level of the why of immersive learning. Then we're going to go to teachers and dashboards, spend some time there because we realize the audience that we're intending to speak to. And then we're going to go outside the classroom and look outside to things like workplace and bigger applications. Okay, surprise at the end. We already covered where the Q&A is happening, so let's start at the beginning. The first question is for Tassos and for Lionel. I'll let the two of you decide who wants to answer first, but the question is, what is the pedagogical added value of immersive technologies in general education?
Okay, I could start if you like, Lionel.
Be my guest.
Okay, thank you. I think that immersive technologies are quite different implementation from other digital applications. One main difference is that the user transforms to a participant. So in immersive environments, we do not have users, but participants. So the participant interacts multisensory and intuitively in real time in immersive environments. He or she has first order point of view and experiences, and a sense of presence in the virtual world through their avatar, or in the augmented world through their own body. The above characteristics, namely multisensory, intuitive, and real-time interaction, immersion, autonomy, representation of objects and facts inside the immersive environments and works by natural semantics, first order point of view or first order experiences, guide us to design effective immersive learning environments. These are technological affordances the unique features these environments have and allow us to do something. So the technological affordances lead us to learning affordances, meaning free navigation, creation, modeling and simulation, multi-channel communication, collaboration and cooperation, content presentation and or delivery. So we can create, build something, we can communicate, collaborate, we can present something. And these learning affordances indicate the learning activities one can design and develop in immersive environments. That is participation in representations of real-time situations, content creation, content exploration or interaction with content, social interaction, and of course, gaming. All the above, as one might see, indicate learner-centered didactic situations and constructivist approaches. So closing, like a conclusion, I would like to say that the pedagogical added value are to use the affordances of these technologies in a meaningful, constructive approach. That's it.
All right.
Okay, so I'm going to add to that, that teachers have tried to use, not just teachers, actually everyone involved in learning has tried to use immersive environment and has used immersive environments for ages. But because they don't even need technology, what technology brings is the ability to do more with immersive environments and to take them further away. So people, because it's about exactly what Tasso said, it's about participation. There are three major dimensions to immersion according to the current state of the art, the current literature on the subject. And one of them is the ability to be present somewhere, which typically, if you don't have technology, that means you have to pick yourself up and go with your students, with your peers to that place. You need to go into a laboratory, you need to go and visit a factory, you need to go and visit a forest. You'll need to be immersed by being situated in some place. But being present is just part of it. You also need to be intellectually engaged. You engage in something. And so here, if you are paying attention, we are engaged in this. And that's part of immersion. Even though we are not present in the same space, we are just faces on the screen. Our level of presence, of co-presence is diminished, but if we are participating in discussion, we are being immersed in that psychological level. The other and the final dimension is about the narrative of it. Even if we are not participating or engaging, if we are listening to the story, if we are understanding the cues, that immerses us also all the same. And I could even provide an example of how technology can then bring it forward further. So do you happen to have cake around you? I do, right? I have some cake. So I have some coffee also. So if you have cookies around you, you are at home, does anyone have something around you? So you have water or tea, looks like it, right, Heather? You water.
Yep.
Okay, so instead of cake, I'll use my black coffee, and I would like to, with you, share a toast by the cameras. Cheers.
Okay. Cheers.
Cheers. Cheers. And so technology allowed us, without the scheduling, anything else but the scheduling for the session, without the traveling, without all the rest, allowed us to share these intimate moments of some drink together. So this is what technology does, not just the presence in some whimsical faraway world, not just those moments that you could always do, but now we can do it further and more common. So we can do it more frequently, not just at the single day semester of the class trip. We can do it more every time. We can do it even in the moments where we are just trying to communicate. We can do it more enhanced, more engaged. It takes us further. So that's the pedagogical value, doing what we would reserve for special occasions in a more widespread manner and in places we could never reach because we could now toast inside a cell.
All right. All right. Great. Thank you. Excellent. Very good. I like that. Very good home participation. I bet you people at home are participating as well. All right. Okay. Oh, Daphne. Yes, an interjection right off the bat. Way to go, Daphne.
Yeah, it's also this. I agree with Leonel. It's this opportunity for creating participatory environments where teachers facilitate active learning. So the immersive technologies offer huge potential that can benefit learners' development, enriching their knowledge base and practice skills. This is due to exactly the immersive nature and ability to share information in a new and engaging way, and the potential to offer virtual experiences that overcome barriers related to cost and distance. There are many promising examples in this technology, using this technology in STEM education, technical training, and arts and humanities, which are part of the general education. Educations can be provided with interactive and engaging tools for classroom learning, such as libraries of immersive content, experiences for specific subjects or learning objectives, and tools for students with learning disabilities. It can also be provided with tools to support different pedagogical approaches, such as blended learning and flipped learning. And learners can be supported to grasp abstract concepts and gain hands-on experience in low-risk virtual settings. So they can enhance STEM courses, medical simulations, arts and humanities material, and technical education.
Excellent. Very good. Thank you. All right. If there's no other interjections, I'm going to actually move on to the next question. That was a perfect segue towards the next question, actually. And this one is going to be for Dennis and Leonel. Okay, so we'll bring Leonel over and we'll add Dennis now. What is the overall vision for incorporating immersive learning? What are some objectives that could be met?
Leonel, would you like me to go first?
Please do, but I think I couldn't hear the question entirely. So could you repeat?
I'll repeat it. It was, what is the overall vision of incorporating immersive learning and what are some objectives that could be met? So I want you all to look at this coin, okay? I know it's a US coin. It's very just bland, let's put it that way. So what are the features of it? What is the main feature of it? You know, it has two sides, right? And I think the vision for immersive learning involves those two sides. There's two sides to immersive learning. One is basically the strength of immersive learning as a field is also its weakness. And the strength is that we're incredibly diverse from almost every geographic area of the world, from a huge range of subject fields and application fields. And that strength, that diversity is a strength. We enjoy that. We enjoy interacting with each other as researchers, as practitioners. There's so many opportunities to draw from the strength of that diversity. But there's another side to that coin. And that means that because there's such diversity, we often, from different fields, don't know each other's work. We reinvent the wheel many times. We use different terminology for the same things. Perhaps maybe recreate the same instrument several different times in different fields. Do far too much perceptions research. And that's another thing that I'm not going to get into right now. But an example of this is something that Leonel just spoke about, how there's different aspects of immersion, of just the idea of what immersion means in our field. We're so many in our field from a more technical perspective have only seen it a very narrow technical definition. Whereas really, if you look at the wide range of definitions of that word, there's just so many different aspects to the word immersion or immersive. Well, I just say that our vision here as a technical subcommittee aligns with our partner, which is the Immersive Learning Research Network. And they had this call for the planning of the knowledge tree of immersive learning research. It's a systemization effort for this field. And I think that's what the vision here is. We need to systematize our field, combine scholarly and practical knowledge, cultivate a robust and ever-growing knowledge base and methodological toolbox for immersive learning. I think we need to aim at promoting evidence-informed practice and guide future research in the field. And in order to do that, we need to, as part of that, we're going to develop common scientific terminology amid the community of researchers. We need to cultivate common understanding of methodologies, and we need to advance common use of theoretical approaches, frameworks, and models. But that's just kind of it in a nutshell. But just remember that, those two sides to immersive learning. Go ahead, Leo.
But yeah, I think that was brilliantly put, and I couldn't agree more. After all, we cooperate together on the knowledge tree every week. But I would like to bring it closer to home to the people listening, which is what are the actual consequences? And when we were talking about reinventing the wheel, well, I think it should serve as a warning of what is happening in immersive learning is often what has happened before in different approaches to technology and education. So people following educational technology, even if you're just restricted to computers in education, in the 70s and 80s, people were focusing on the effect of the computer. Dozens, hundreds of studies on what happens when you bring the computer into the classroom. And after thousands, millions of human hours wasted in research, people realized, of course, the computer by itself does not produce any concrete difference. It depends on how you use it. It's not a chemical. You don't just bring it. And so ever since the 80s, people that were working on the impact of computers in education started to worry about, we need to realize how they are used, and then that's what we can extract conclusions from. And they have been working like that ever since in educational research. But then comes the late 80s, early 90s, and the edutainment software industry that does the same. What's the impact of edutainment? What's the edutainment software? For those unacquainted with the term, it's a mixture of education and entertainment. So what's about the impact of edutainment? And again, thousands of studies go and try to find what's the impact of this piece of software on education. What's the effect of this piece of software on learning? And what happens? One study says positive effect, very big positive effect. Another says negative impact. Another says no effect. And once the dust settles, they realize, oh, the software by itself doesn't ensure anything or change anything, but in a concrete way, it depends on how you use it. And then educational software use, like people, math teachers around here listening know about GeoGebra and the other software. You need to decide how to use it. And so everything is settled. No, because late 90s, early 2000s sees the emergence of serious games. Serious games is a new field. And so new conferences emerge. And there comes the new studies. You guessed it. What's the impact of serious games on education? And again, the same thing. And you see the same thing on immersive learning. So immersive learning, lots of the people coming to immersive learning are about the technologies. And so the same studies, what's the impact of VR on education? What's the impact of AR on education? They are reaching the same conclusions, of course, which is it's pointless to measure the impact of the technology in learning without pairing it with the way in which it is used. That's why I and Dennis and Patrick O'Shea made 2 years ago, made a huge survey of surveys where we had over 20 years of surveys on educational research, not to find impacts, but to gather what actual accounts of use exist. And we have drafted and submitted, and we are now in the process of editing and publication of also what kind of educational practices and educational strategies are actually documented in the literature. Because if you want to describe or measure some impact, you must say, this is how I used it. And the how I used it requires you to have some sort of a benchmark, some sort of reference saying, there are these kinds of uses, I'm following that kind of use, or I created a new one. There are these kinds of practices, I'm aligning with that practice, or I created a new one. This is the kind of reference that you need to describe as best as possible what you are observing. Otherwise, you'll be very happy with your results, but your results ultimately will be meaningless, because if you don't control for your actual educational approach, the technology by itself is unpredictable.
That's right. And I just want to follow up with that really quickly. We really need to, you talked about objectives for the field, right, Heather? We really need to move beyond what Lionel has so well described as this cycle of, oh, a new technology. Oh, it's going to have this huge impact by itself, like some sort of magical elixir that you pour into your cauldron and you say a spell over or something, and you get this magical change in students. That's never going to happen, ever. And it's been proven in research again and again and again. We need to move towards more what technologies work in specific circumstances with specific kinds of students in order to reach specific outcomes. And really, the only way to do that is as Lionel also said, is focus on the how of it. Okay, so what those specific pedagogical strategies, practices, and uses, break those down, and don't allow research to separate learning outcomes from the actual activity that led to those learning outcomes.
Cool. Can I ask you both a follow-up question? Because actually they must have pulled an old bio from me at the beginning. I'm actually not associated with iLearn anymore. So I'm out of the communication loop on iLearn's knowledge tree efforts. Can you give us a quick update as to how real term is seeing some knowledge tree results going to be? Because I still get asked questions as to, is there a database I can go to? Is there a place where I can start to pull these research conclusions out of? Is there anything yet to see for the knowledge tree?
It's still under development, so there's not yet. However, Lionel has a multimedia master student that he is currently working with, named Madalena, who is doing some amazing work to help with some of that development. We're hoping that sometime this year we'll have a draft kind of like at the beginning aspects of it. There is a call out right now, and I'll post that in the chat a little bit later for submissions to the knowledge tree, because I mean, as you might imagine, we're not expecting ourselves to be able to even come up with not even a 20th or a 30th of it, because of the diversity of researchers and practitioners in the field. So we need people to submit to it. We need ideas for people, not just for empirical studies either, theoretical frameworks and ontologies and epistemologies and methods and instruments and et cetera, et cetera. Excellent. We need all of that. So sorry, go ahead.
No, that's great. No, you got it. They need everything. Yes.
Yes. So basically, the knowledge tree will produce results at a slow pace. The point now is rather gathering contributions. So if you have an idea, for instance, that how to structure this, you could say, you can go to that call and say, I'd like to lead an effort where with the resources I'm making available right now, to try to come up with a structure. Or we think there is the need for a specific instrument to do this and make it available. So what we do is we get these proposals, review them, and we give them the okay, saying we think they're credible. So you are acknowledged to pursue your effort under the banner of the knowledge tree. And once you have results, to publish on them. You also will have the responsibility to regularly post updates on how that effort is progressing. So just that in case it stalls, It doesn't prevent someone else from picking up the same concept just because someone said they would do it, but then actually do nothing.
Okay.
So the whole point right now is telling the community that rather than just doing it alone without trying to come together, there is an outlet to try and bring these efforts together.
Yeah, right. So Lionel, both and I are dropping links in the chat. We'll explain those a little bit, but Tassos, I see you have your hand raised.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Lionel's and Dennis' approach reminded me the framework of technological, pedagogical content knowledge. Am I correct?
In terms of, there's similarity in terms of that, kind of an encompassing framework through which you can categorize or acknowledge different aspects of the research, if that's what you're asking. Somewhat so, although I would say that TPAC or TPCK is much more like a small part, maybe part of the root of the knowledge tree. Whereas we're envisioning for the knowledge tree something that starts with the roots, the epistemological and ontological roots of the field of immersive learning, that would then grow up into things like scoping reviews and systematic reviews and other things, conceptual frameworks like TPAC, other things like that, and then flowering out into branches and trees and leaves, and even to things, whereas TPAC is much more theoretical and research-based. One aspect of the knowledge tree that I want to emphasize is this is not just a research thing. It's a practitioner and research thing. So right now there's a call for proposals for video exemplars, for example, of specific pedagogical activities done in specific immersive learning environments. And I'll post that later on in the chat as well. And the idea of it is that we're going to tie those video exemplars that are vetted to specific research that's already been done. And if there's not been research done on it, we're going to connect the people, the practitioners who innovated those exemplars with researchers that can help test those things in future research studies. So it's that kind of a research to practice connection.
Okay.
One thing I'd like to complement is that TPAC is a nice step in the concept that you need to blend the learning content, technology, and curriculum, but it's very shallow. The way in which TPAC guides academics or practitioners is roughly saying, as long as you move on this way, you're doing something right. Okay, that's a good starting point. But if you want to compare approaches, you need more than just saying, I use this content and that has this curriculum concerns, because everything you do in the classroom, everything you do with your students matters. So the level of detail can sometimes be very, very hands down. So one of the things, for instance, we did when we analyzed uses, and that this is besides practices and the strategies, just down to earth uses, immediate uses, is find these 16 categories of uses, and then we place them on this on this axis of the immersion dimensions. So you have something like going after, if you want to go after immersion by engagement, just keeping people engaged, you're basically leveraging the challenge dimension and disregarding the rest. But if the engagement has some story to it, has some logic, you probably start to have narrative aspects like in collaboration uses or skill training. Again, you can start to employ more technology. And so, for instance, instead of just having the plain engagement, you could move all the way to these ad sets and virtual manipulation for interactive manipulation and exploration, which is very similar to engagement, but in that you are adding this added sense of presence. And by clarifying uses in such a more detailed and precise way, more concrete aspects, it's much more reliable that you can reproduce, compare, or classify what you're doing in the actual classroom. So what our proposal is that you do not simply use the shallow approach of TPAC, but you try to describe as clearly as possible what is happening. And this includes the locations in classrooms or in other settings, but it may need to include the political context. It may need to include the sociological aspects and cultural aspects that are being influencing there. So as you should do on another kind of learning research. In most learning research, all these aspects matter. And so what we are saying is that if you're doing research on immersive learning, you should use the same level of rigor and diligence that you apply to other kinds of learning research.
Okay. I'm looking at the clock and I have to move us along. So I'm going to actually change the tone right now. I'm very purposely going to turn us now towards the classroom, teachers, and we're going to focus our question now. And I'm actually going to push some of the people I've previously assigned questions out, and I'm going to reassign them. And this time I'm going to put Melanie and Daphne on this question, which is, let's assume that the decision to incorporate immersive learning has been made for a classroom. So we're not really looking at the researcher side of it now. We're going to look at the practitioner side of it now. So the question for both of you is, how do we train that teacher to use immersive learning? And then they're going to have to answer to a boss at some point. So how do they measure the results of using that immersive learning technology? That's for you two, Daphne and Melanie. Yes, go ahead, Melanie.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much. I think a lot has already been said for this topic from Lionel, especially this that goes beyond TPAC is very important. I think what is also very important is best practice or good practice examples of what worked. What has also been said, what is important is that it does not work in general. You have to find the things that fit for your class, so the individual solutions. And even within your class, you have a very big heterogeneity. So what works for one pupil must not work for the other pupil automatically. I think one very important thing is the attitude of people, but you said it is, or the decision has already been done to implement it into the classroom. I think to convince teachers, to provide them with self-confidence, they have to see how it works, they have to feel how it works, and to see those best practice examples as well. On the other hand, what I often saw in practice was this kind of that people were really wanted to use technology and thought technology changes everything and it's the best to use technology. And then on the other hand, we have those people who deny to use technology, who don't want to use it. I think what is important is to find a balance so that we don't have only those enthusiasts. And the most important thing that I always try to teach to my students is the content, to the teacher training students. So it is very important to look at the content, and the content that has to be brought to the pupils in schools. And from this, then you can choose what material, what learning environment you want to use and you want to develop around it. So this is, I think, very, very important. And another thing is also, I think, very important is that the teachers who use this technology are rewarded in some kind, so that they get some kind of incentive on to use it. And the other question was how to measure the outcome. I think this is something that the teachers have to learn in to become a good teacher, that they see the effect on their pupils. So I think that's a very individual thing that they have to learn during their studies.
Okay. Daphne.
Yeah, I mean, immersive learning holds significant promises for maximizing the efficiency and effectiveness of learning through the augmentation of existing pedagogical methods in a variety of areas, as we discussed earlier. An important pedagogical consideration is clearly documenting the design intentions corresponding to the learning requirements or the learning outcomes, and being able to articulate those aims for learners and design immersive learning experience that they support them. Another consideration is how those immersive learning experience will be integrated in the curriculum, what and where the immersive learning experience will be used, how is it going to be used. We have seen in literature loads of studies using various qualitative and quantitative approaches to evaluate the pedagogical value of immersive learning. Traditional methods include progress, competition, replays, performance indicators like decisions, demonstrating the learning cognitive judgment, or the time spent for making decisions and completing learning modules to verify the validity of the tools used. I'm very much interested nowadays in looking at objective measures like biometric data that offer educations and specialists new tools to determine how strongly students are engaged in the learning activity and accordingly make changes to help improve the learning experiences. Using metrics like usage data, who is engaged in the learning activity, how often they are using it, how long it takes them to complete the task. Biometric performance indicators like body movement, non-verbal signals that convey the learner's feelings in a specific context. Retinal tracking that is also an up-and-coming performance metric that shows who, where, and what learners are looking at. Facial expressions that capture emotions and engagements. EEG, we have some EEG examples that they show data can be used for measuring learning effectiveness. My question is how we can plan systematic studies using such objective metrics that serve our pedagogical objectives, so we can persuade also teachers that something works and then they can adapt it. How do we analyze and combine all this data to make useful pedagogical conclusions? Are there standard methods that we can use? And is this the direction that we have to work to offer to the educational community tools to enable systematic design of pedagogically effective learning experiences?
Yes, and Dennis, I'm going to allow you the briefest of comment.
It's going to be really brief. Okay. Just my experience, I've worked with teachers for over 25 years, and my experience is that this is probably a US based perspective, but they're so focused on teaching to standards, specific standards, that unless we align our work, the creation of the immersive learning environments, the creation of the pedagogical activities within those environments with those specific standards, they're not going to do it. And they need ongoing, not just one and done mentoring or professional development opportunities in order to see this actually come about.
Nice. Okay. All right. So again, keeping an eye on the clock, and I hate to bring us down to it, but would you believe we haven't talked about the ecosystem yet to realize where we're at? So I'm going to make one last final question, and you may have noticed there's a panelist we haven't heard from yet. So we're going to go to Anasol for this question, and we're going to bring it back around to Tassos for this last question. So you guys get the last word, so to speak, from our formal questions. You would not believe the questions we've left on the road, side of the road behind us on this webinar. So I would like you both to address the question of how do we move on from prototypes to well-established ecosystems?
Right. Well, moving from prototypes to well-established ecosystems. I guess the challenge is, as it has already been mentioned extensively, the challenge is not in exciting people with the art of the possible. I think we are beyond that, but actually move on from demos and small apps to more operational and sustainable systems. That's a big challenge, actually. First of all, we need to address what Lionel, Dennis, Tassos, everyone has been mentioned, particularly systematic common knowledge and terminology between the different actors. And this involves not only people in the pedagogical side, but we also need to involve all the stakeholders, including IT people, for example, who need to sustain these systems, who need to involve admin people, who needs to understand why do we need this and how do we implement this. So it's kind of bringing into the picture everyone into sustaining these ecosystems, which was kind of the word of the day. We haven't talked a lot about it, but there you go. That's the word. So yeah, we need this system terminology, common knowledge and terminology. We also need to think about sustainable content creation. A big amount of investment is done in creating solutions that only work for a specific case, and then it cannot be adapted to other things. I understand, I mean, Melanie mentioned that, yeah, we do need to think about the use cases and focus on specific outcomes. I agree completely. I'm not moving on from what she said, but what I'm saying is we need to have a common framework which allows us to reuse things that we already have to avoid going into this cycle that Lionel mentioned at the beginning. Is like creating a new demo based on new technology and then prove it again and prove it again and prove it again. What we need to have is a commonality between all the different actors, and yeah, content creation is a big one. Another thing in my perspective from industry is we need to prepare the institutions and the schools to support the platforms that we are talking about, because sometimes they get used for a few times and then they get abandoned due to the lack of technical support within the institution. So preparing the IT departments to support the teachers is also very important. And well, it's not just a challenge in educational institutions, it's also a challenge in companies. From my perspective, as mentioned, immersive learning has huge potential in training purposes. However, it hasn't been explored enough due to all these different challenges. And the final one that Melanie mentioned is technology acceptance. We have a lot of people who is, yeah, definitely believers in this idea, but we also have people who is they are still trying to get around this new concept. Well, it's not new, but this new concept for them. So definitely we need to address all of these different challenges. And well, just looking at the clock, I cannot address all of them, and so I'm just going to pass the word to Tassos for his input as well.
Thank you, Anasol. Of course, I agree with you and all of you. I think that a common framework is the basis to move on from prototypes to well-established ecosystems. And I think that affordances of immersive technologies are important to be introduced in this framework in order to know what and how to do it with a certain immersive technology in a certain discipline. And of course, meaningful and purposeful applications have to be there. So we have to use learning theories, transform them into instructional models, and after that to instructional strategies or techniques to do the work right. But mainly, I think that mainly this is a matter, the ecosystem, I mean, is a matter of educational policy. For us working at public education, this is very important.
Yeah, excellent.
Yeah.
That hasn't been mentioned yet. So nice concluding point. Very good. Wow. And look at that. We've made it. We still have a couple of minutes left. So as promised, we saved a surprise for the end of this webinar. And so for my panelists, you can feel free to turn off your cameras if you feel comfortable doing so and muting your mics. However, we do have at least one Q&A I see waiting in the queue. So don't run away because I might need you for the Q&A. We're going to come back to the Q&A, but first our surprise for our attendees. Fridolin, if you will come back on camera, I'd like to look at you. Oh my gosh, he's definitely come back on camera. All right, so here's our surprise. Fridolin has asked for specific time to talk to us for a few minutes today. Fridolin, I have no idea what you're about to do.
Hello, I'm the big surprise now. Yes, let me just turn that off. was not born like what you have just seen, using a snap filter with which I can be almost anything I want to be on screen. I was born blonde, my hair turned brown, blackish over my lifetime, probably because my character came through. And now I'm slowly turning back, I like to think blonde again in my 40s. I speak a mashup of different dialects, born in Germany, lived a couple of years in Vienna in Austria, and living now more than a decade in rainy Oxford. And yes, sunshine is a state of mind. But I spent most of my life in research speaking some sort of Orwellian, you speak English. So bear with me if you don't understand me correctly. Then it's probably what I have been saying. Should it be my dialect, then please drop a message in the chat. I would like to share my screen with you to talk to you about something that is very close to my heart, and that is rapid reskilling with augmented reality as one of the technologies in the canon we look at in iLearn, because rapid reskilling is what we currently need. And I spent now more than a decade building up a tool stack with lots of partners and researchers, including here on this panel, to build a software called Mirage XR that we're integrating into Moodle. Rapid reskilling is important because we need to change the way we educate and become much more real-time, much more on the job, much more going from unskilled to mastery in no time. We have just recently analyzed the achievements of the field in augmented reality-based learning, looking at Bloom's taxonomy and the support we find in literature. And it motivates us even more so to pursue what we've been doing, finding essentially that most of the tools out there available for educators to teach with augmented reality only facilitate the lower levels of Bloom, remembering, understanding, some of them applying and transferring to practice, but especially on those higher cognitive levels of analyzing, evaluating, creating, they fall tremendously short. Of course, not the tool we're building, because it has been pedagogically informed by design. We have built in a learning design model and instructional design model that has a wide range of building blocks that can be instantiated. We call them augmentations, different types of content that facilitate learning and direction of attention and many other things in ways you could not imagine. There's a lot of literature published about it. But to highlight just one great example of things we have built and invented, that's the ghost track that you see here in this video. The ghost track allows us to record body movement of an expert instructor, explaining things in situ on the situation, in the context where the knowledge is required, pointing at real world objects, pointing at a patient here in this medical setting, and using in interplay with other augmentation types, a rather engaging strategy to get people to learn something where they most desperately need it. We have gathered around us a growing developer community. We have, I think it's grown now to 36 members since this slide was conceived, a developer community full with, of course, software developers, but also testers, usability designers, managers, issue trackers, and many other roles, in which we have released this cross-platform application and the server-side modules required to integrate with Moodle and to deliver real-time learning analytics over the last few years. It's open source now since October 2020, and we're just looking at releasing version 1.9 this month to go to store again. It's thriving, as you can see there, with high quality software development. If you have a stake in this too and would like to seek a project where you can piggyback to get started with the exciting things, not having to take care of all the standard stuff that users really need, then come join us. It is an open community and we're very happy to engage. The way it works is we have the cross-platform application which runs on HoloLens 1, HoloLens 2, iOS and Android. Would very happily also support other platforms like Oculus Quest or Magic Leap, or similar things, maybe even bridging over to VR. And that interface then through the IEEE standard ARLEM, augmented reality learning experience models, with, in our case, a Moodle. The Moodle plugin is also open source. We've released that, and it allows others to add augmented reality learning activities to the rich mix provided by Moodle anyways. So when you are on a course, you just create a new activity and you select augmented reality, and you can then select a unit produced in the producer that has been uploaded to the backend. I should mention that there is, of course, also the IEEE Experience API support for logging learner behavior data to a so-called learning record store to integrate with other behavioral traces in other tools in a distributed landscape. ARLEM is a standard since 2020, facilitating the exchange of augmented reality content. It consists of two parts. It consists of an activity description language and a workplace description language. Workplace being a fancy word for an office, a classroom, a lab, wherever you need to learn, and the workplace description contains information about what's in your environment, where locations are, and how to interact with them, or how to speak to sensors. That then can be featured in the workflow description language, in the activity description language, that does more than simply presenting 3D models to users, but rather takes an activity theory based approach of facilitating human tasks and guiding people step by step through how to achieve them. Yeah, that's it, what I wanted to advertise. It's close to my heart. It's a great open source project. You can benefit from it too. If you want to try it out, the apps are in store or downloadable for HoloLens. And if you're interested in the open source code project released under an MIT license, we're still on GitLab, but are about to move to GitHub completely. Our Moodle is already there. Please help. Thank you.
Yay! Extra points for squeezing in Dancing Baby. Oh my goodness. Like, I know all I need to know about your sense of humor.
Yeah, the standards are so important. That was one of the first standards, I think, in 3ds Max for the exchange of 3D model information, the Dancing Baby. That's why it's so famous, and it has been featured in film and all over the place, but it comes back to someone sticking that into a software they developed because they believed in open standards.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you. All right. So Friedlin, maybe is it possible for you to put some of those links in the chat marked for everyone then? And while you're doing that, I will now segue over to Madison and Taylor and say, could you bring us to our Q&A, please? And by the way, I certainly want to recognize that we're over the top of the hour, and I know how this works with people in their busy lives. So obviously we expect if folks need to jump off or get onto other parts of our life, we're gonna finish up the Q&A before we wrap this session. But if you have to go, no problem. But we will make up answers and pretend that you're still here if we have to. So or Madison and Taylor, do you want me to look at the Q&A? I don't think I would trust me. Why don't you?
I can read the question. We only have one right now. It's from Eric, and he asked, are immersive learning environments the best way to transform information into knowledge?
Ooh. Does anybody on the panel want to jump out at that one? Are immersive learning environments the best way to transfer information?
I can pick it, but and someone can take it afterwards. So the first misgiver there is that hardly anyone can vouch for any approach as being the best in education. So I can let someone else speak the second part of it, the transformation of information into knowledge. But remember, when you want to develop learning, so knowledge is one part of it. You have a subject, a brain, right? And that's just people, because you can address learning organizations and other matters. But if you just stress people, you've got a brain who has to develop that knowledge physically, internally, that brain has a history of its own internal self-organization, of all its values, of all that it has done. And that brain is not in isolation doing your education, is doing its own living, it in its own relationships, demands, overloads, requests, anxieties, needs. So there's a whole world around that brain. So there is hardly one best way to do something with so many different people, different circumstances. They are definitely a powerful way, a very impactful and effective way to do something, but I would never look at an educational approach, this or any other, with the expectation that it would be the best. It simply does not work like that.
Anyone else want to add in on that question?
I can jump in here. I fully agree. And then again, it depends on which level you look at. So if you look at learning on a very low level, on kind of how our memory system works, then of course, immersive learning, full sensory learning is superior to anything else that is mono-channel, single modality. But it's a rather simple level. The interesting stuff happens on the higher cognitive levels, and there it really depends on what you do. So of course we can feed our sensory semantic memory that it undoubtedly is, and that's a much better model than the old-fashioned box model with short-term and long-term memory. If we feed that sensory semantics stream of understanding and consciousness, great. It has the best chances to become something meaningful, but of course it's not the full story. It depends really on what you do with it.
Yep. Oh my goodness, we got nods of yes from almost around the entire panel on that one. Any other comments on that?
I think what Melanie said earlier was really key. And just that it's so important that even within one class, if you're giving a lecture, just a standard, information transmission lecture, you have to be aware of your different students and their backgrounds and their learning preferences and that sort of a thing. And if you're not, it's going to fall on, it's going to be very ineffective approach. So, I mean, in terms of there's always the contrast, right, between can and does it, or can and should. So can immersive learning environments be used for information transmission into knowledge? Yes, clearly there's plenty of opportunities for that sort of thing out there. Should they? I'm uncomfortable with should questions because there's the moral aspect of it involved, but I would almost say they shouldn't, because there's better platforms out there for lecturing. There's more effective ones, like, for example, Zoom is a great platform to do that sort of a thing. But that's just me. Now, for interaction, for spatial audio, being able to hear someone behind me in an immersive learning environment and say, "Hey, Dennis," and I have to turn around to see them. You can't beat that for immersive learning environments, but that's another question.
All right, I've promised my panel will wrap with just one lightning question. You know what lightning questions mean? Quick answers, right? And this is for people in the chat too. So those of you out there, my participants, I see you. It's for you too in the chat. And I'm gonna type it in the chat so you don't get out of this. Name one favorite thing you are looking forward to in immersive learning. Lightning. And anybody can go first. Lightning strikes anywhere. Who wants to go first? Your favorite thing that you're looking forward to. One thing. Zombies, floating cars, going to Mars. What do you want to do in immersive learning? Name one thing. You're all like, "Ugh, we want to get out of the webinar."
every step, awareness of everything that is going on at my fingertips and around me, so I can simply not be overwhelmed with it.
Awareness and not being overwhelmed. Got it. Noted. Who else?
Yes.
Eric's answered. Daphne's answered. Who else? Fridolin, go.
Bridging context and finally overcoming the continuum to make it one, so that AR, VR are all connected, that we can bridge space and time and make the whole immersive learning, augmented learning universe much more exciting than it ever could be.
Nice. Tassos has answered in the chat.
I think Fridolin is the best answer. I'm going for that one. I'm sold on that one. So yeah, creating this connection in which you seamless go between all these different technologies, but also bringing different type of people into it. So have more collaboration into all of this.
Yes, and Anasol, to piggyback on that, the not just the seamless between the technologies, but between the environments that the technologies are used to access, right? So if you're in an AR environment, then I can be in one, and I can step from that, virtually step into a virtual reality environment similar with you, and have that seamless interaction. So very much looking forward to that.
Good. Melanie.
Yeah, I think that's all great answers. I also like Tasso's answer about the unseen world. This is especially interesting in mathematical concepts. So if we can be successful in visualizing really our mathematical ideas, or the mathematical concepts that we have in ourselves.
Yeah. Very good. Taylor and Madison, you don't get out of it. Do you have answers? You can type them in the chat too, if you like. Very good. I was going to say the same while they're thinking if they want to put an answer there. I was going to say the same thing. I'm most excited about the fact that I see all, just like Dennis said, I'm going to piggyback on Dennis, who was piggybacking on Anasol, who was piggybacking on Fridolin, was just this idea of connected educator communities. I see so many, they're like little outposts, and in there are these great educator communities, and we're sending messages to each other, and we're not yet quite connected. And so a meeting just like this, a webinar just like this, an organization just like this is meant to connect us. So well done. And Taylor gives us something. Thank you, Taylor. Well done. Well done. With that, I'm going to bring us to a close and let us see if Taylor and Madison have any wrap up. I want to thank my panel so much for doing such a great job with their preps. They actually came prepared with examples and a wide variety of time zones today. And if you're watching on recording later, we're so glad that you actually joined us later. So yeah, no cake though. Lionel's cake, whatever he's eating, I want some of that, let me tell you.
Heather, thank you so much for the wonderful webinar, and to all the panelists, thank you as well for your time, and all the participants who joined. We hope you enjoyed this webinar, and we encourage you to register for the other Education Week events hosted by the Education Society. So thank you again, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Take care of each other. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.